Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's walked alongside them, and how they're helping others along the way. Today is episode 9 of season 2, and I'm your host, Tim Vogel. In this episode, we're speaking with someone very special. His name is Dave Bohlmann. I get the wonderful pleasure of working with him on a near daily basis. So welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, Dave.
Well, thanks. It's fun working with you every day, too.
That's good, yeah. So when we talk about building geniuses and how you get your start, Dave Bohlmann is so special to me because he was the one that really introduced me to everything that is building automation.
Yeah.
So it was my first, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell the story. It was my first day on the job, and I get shipped out to San Jose, I think it was.
Or Santa Clara.
Santa Clara, yeah, something. And I was told that I was going to meet with someone named Dave. I had no idea what you look like or even who you were or what you did. But it's like, you're going to go out there with Dave. And so once you get to the hotel, just, text him, here's his number. So I text you and you say, oh, I'm outside smoking a cigar.
Yep.
I didn't know that's how you pronounced it. I said cigar, but
No, that's wrong.
Looking back, I now know it's cigar. And so I walk outside, and then sure enough, you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt with your sunglasses, smoking a cigar. I was like, that must be the guy. And you're like, oh, you must be the new guy. I was like, yeah. We introduced, and we just, we started having conversation, and it was so funny, and because you're like, so, what did you do? I'm like, not building automation. And I started asking you questions, and I remember like you had mentioned something, and you said a set point. I was like, so what is a set point? And you're like, oh no, okay, that's where we're gonna go. And we talked for hours, and then we went to the booth, and we set up, and we had the booth, and then that went well. And I'm just sitting there like, oh, I'm brand new. Ask him, any question. And then that night we ended up enjoying some hookah and mango. What was the hookah? It was spearmint ambrosia.
Yeah, spearmint ambrosia and mango. I forget what.
Mango smoothies.
Yeah.
And that was great.
Oh, I still remember that like it was yesterday. That was fun.
That was a lot of fun.
And you really soaked up things. It was just, I was the new guy. Oh, I really get to corrupt him now. But, but it was a lot of fun.
But, that was kind of my introduction to, everything that is the industry in an event that, still today we're attending. And so anyways, I'm just very excited to have you on and to ask you more questions and to learn from you even more. I mean, just like we do all the time. And I think everyone on the team, looks to Dave, on the entire KMC team. It's like, Dave's the guy, Dave knows things. And but you also come at it with a spirit of wanting to teach and wanting others to be better. And so we'll get into all that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do for KMC now, and then we'll just go back to the beginning.
Oh, okay. So right now, I've been here for 19 years, but last 6 or 7, I guess, been focused on Commander and help figure out what Commander needs to do and help with designing the system and how it's architected and with our cloud services and that. But lately, I've been trying to help, besides keeping tabs on the new features and helping test and that, but helping with some of our customers with their some of the bigger jobs and that, and helping them get things through. I do a lot of programming through our API to save a lot of time, and they might have a job that has 600 devices or 500 or 1,000 devices and that, and so I can quickly build up that job with their dashboards through the API and that. But also just keep tabs too, helping you with as we partner with people and that. Is this really going to work, and how's it going to work? And I like you bring in a lot of new ideas along with Commander too. And it's okay, so now how can we make this real and make it, that's fun.
Yeah. I think I mentioned you earlier during a meeting we had, and I used the phrase keeping us honest.
Oh.
And, that's one of the things that you do so well, and it's because of the experience you have, and, you've kind of been through it. And one of the most recent things was talking to a partner. You're like, so how's this going to be supported? It's like, well, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. You're like, well,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe we should think about that a little bit more. Which then, ultimately led to a great conversation. That's the teamwork and the mentality that we, take together and that I so appreciate. Now, you're also doing quite a few things around cybersecurity.
Yeah, we're Brad and I especially, and then with Eric and that, we're starting out with SOC 2 and trying to get that cert, and that cybersecurity, there's always a lot more work than what you figure it's going to be, and it involves more people in that, and so we're still trying to get that going first, and then we'll move on to there's other kind of security frameworks that we'll probably do. ISO 27000 might be one, or we can do the NIST 800 and that, or there's a one that's kind of geared for our industry called ISA 62443, and that's another one. But right now we're focused on how Commander fits into cybersecurity, and then as we do our SOC 2, we just focus on the Commander side of that, and then we'll have that experience, and then we can bring the whole plant, the whole company into it as well as we mature into more. But and it never ends.
Yeah. I mean, it's an ever growing topic.
Yeah.
All kinds of new frameworks.
Yeah.
Even frameworks or organizations that we're a part of that are trying to build frameworks, not so much at our level as a technology provider, but at a different level of what about if you're a building owner? What sort of framework do you need to look at to understand, what is the threat that I have? I'm not producing these solutions, but I am implementing them, and they're going to affect me.
Yeah. A lot of some companies you have to watch out with, where to them cybersecurity is kind of like almost a checkbox, where okay, I've got SOC 2 or I've got ISO 27K or whatever, but that's kind of goes against the grain of what cybersecurity is. It's really I call it cyber hygiene, which is an old kind of phrase. It's a daily thing. Everybody's going to be thinking about it, and it's not just a checkbox kind of thing. But then, like they're saying, some frameworks work better for different things. There's an IT thing, and the SOC is more CPA kind of thing, but there's a lot of overlap too. So when we talk to the customers, they ask us about our cybersecurity stance. There's that kind of conversation. Well, how does really Commander fit in per se? So it's good that everybody's thinking about it. And we're not quite, the standards and the frameworks are not all quite there, especially with our industry in a way. And so there's still more input, more growth for that.
Well, there's endless conversation as well. I mean, just so many voices in the space that are helping guide it. And I think a lot of them, rightly so. And we've had a couple of them on the podcast too. And I'm thinking Fred Gordy and Lucia Niemeyer to start. Along with, again, numerous other people that are doing it. So let's springboard off that just a little bit in terms of cybersecurity. Who do you think you are? What sort of qualifications, do you have to be able to do that? But more importantly, how did you get into them?
Well, cyber when I grew up, in a way, I cut my teeth as an engineer 42 years ago, and that was in defense. And so you're thinking about security and that. And for us, security was a little different than that, but you're always kind of thinking about that in the back of your mind and in the front of your mind or whatever. But then as, throughout different parts of our career, when I was I was a Disney consultant for a while, so I was a Disney Imagineer, and the product we were working on was very secure. And so again, it's just different kinds of ways of doing security and that. And then finally, for here, I've been here for 19 years. And then once we were doing Commander, we wanted Commander to be a showcase for a secure solution in that, because IoT security was a big thing. Then Richard asked me to, get my cert and help with that. But we already knew some things regarding IT security and how IT wants to keep things going. And I'd worked with networking guys for quite a while before them too. So, and you bring all that in, and then you learn, the horror stories, what other people didn't do, and all that, and how do we make sure we don't fall into that?
Yeah. So, yeah. Learning from others' failures.
Yeah. Hopefully, you don't make as many of your own mistakes. But
right. Yeah. Well, you just make different ones.
Well, the trick is if you make a mistake, hurry up and fix it before anybody finds out.
Yeah.
But
yeah, man. And so you went all the way back to 42 years ago. You said you started in engineering and doing a lot of, some work with defense. I mean, what got you into engineering in the very? I guess let's go back to your school. Where'd you go to school? And what got you into that subject?
Yeah, let's see, I graduated high school in 77, and then I wanted to do nuclear physics research in that, and so there was a school, University of Evansville, Indiana is where I went, and so I started out in the physics program, and then about halfway through, I still was going to do physics and that, but I figured out that in order to get a job as a physicist, you had to go to grad school, and then you had to do this, and then they don't pay that much, and there's not that many jobs. So I figured out a way to get my physics degree and my electrical engineering degree and still do it in 4 years time. I had to do some summer work for that.
Yeah.
But then when I graduated, I had a teaching fellowship offer from the Air Force University in Dayton to work on some laser stuff, whatever that means. And but I guess I was kind of a little tired of school, so I just wanted to work. And so instead I went to St. Louis and worked for McDonnell Douglas working on the F-15. Back then, that's when Reagan just was starting out with his first term. And so we needed a lot of engineers in the industry for defense, and I was just one of the many out there. So. And,
obviously, whatever you could share, but what were you doing for the F-15?
Oh, well.
It was related to the electrical side or the physics side?
No, it was, most of my work on the electrical side or firmware. So did 2 years on the F-15 making what we call the automated test equipment. So something be wrong with some part of the airplane, the guys could take it out, put it in our stuff, and we could tell it what to do to quickly fix it. And then 2 years later, the California called. And I wanted, all right, let's go to California. And so I went out and worked at Northrop on the Peacekeeper missile there, doing the similar thing, automated test. And then after that, last year there, Joy and I got married, and then I wanted to go to seminary. We had prayed a lot about having a church or doing mission work. She had already done some mission work, so we came to Fort Wayne, Indiana, where one of our seminaries was. But then you realize, you're trying to start a family. Well, that means you need some money.
Yeah.
And so I started working for Magnavox, and there I switched from test to regular avionics and that. The first the first movie I took her to was to see the original Top Gun, because I wasn't working on that plane, but it was kind of similar.
Yeah.
And then right after we moved to Fort Wayne, the first movie I took her to was The Hunt for Red October, because I was working on the real stuff.
Yeah.
But you couldn't, you could say, if you could laugh at their displays. Well, the real stuff looks a lot better than that, and it did. But anyway, and then once we kind of quote unquote won the Cold War, then it was more consumer electronics, and that's I got into air telephony, and that, and then right before I came here, I was, like I said, a Disney Imagineer, flying back and forth working for the mouse.
Now, you mentioned a pretty important movie there, The Hunt for Red October.
Oh.
So if you're listening to the audio version of this, I would encourage you to pause it and jump over to the YouTube version, because we're going to show on the screen my favorite picture of James Earl Jones. So this is what it is right now. Oh, and then here's the real picture also.
This is the real picture.
Yeah.
They can see it. we left Fort Wayne and we came here to work at Crown, and you got that there? Does that work out? Okay. And that's poor or Mr. Jones. And so our first trade, we were working on digital satellite for radio stuff. And so he happened to be at the first national broadcasters convention. And so I walked up to get the picture, and I said, I really liked you in The Hunt for Red October because I worked on the real stuff. And then he has that face because he can't remember what movie it was. And then, so they take the picture, and then after that he says, "Oh, the submarine movie." Yeah.
Well, your guys' face, both of you.
Yeah, we're both kind of
every single time I see it, I laugh and I love it so much, and I call it my favorite picture of James Earl Jones. That's you and Darth Vader. That's amazing.
Vader,
yeah. So now another thing. Well, let's talk about this first. So you talked about when you first went to school, you wanted to be what'd you say? You said nuclear physics. What about nuclear physics interested you? I mean, was it the culture at the time, or were you just...
No, it was kind of like the part of the front edge of physics, I guess, and that. And while I was there, I was getting more interested in elementary particles and that. But nuclear physics is a little different than nuclear engineering, which is where you go and you run a nuclear plant and all that. And I didn't want to do that. I was just interested in whatever, which was more research.
Yeah.
But then it's like, the math is just crazy. I was able to kind of keep up with the math and all that. But then the engineering, I always liked tinkering. And then, like I said, that's when I figured, there's more jobs out there for electrical engineers, and I don't have to do all that math necessarily. But every once in a while, in some of the things I did with defense and that, I'd have to use my physics. And for a couple of my hobbies, I use my physics more too. But it's everything's interesting.
Yeah.
To me, and that's why I started out with that. So
you're a naturally curious person, and you don't just kind of do surface level. You dig down and you figure it out. And in some cases, you figure out things. You talk about your hobbies. You figure out things. It's like, why are you taking hours to do that calculation? And but then it's like that's just what you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So I'll tell another fun story about you. So it was last year we had made these special Valentines. I have two young boys. They were 6 and 8 at the time. And my 8-year-old wanted to be an astronaut. And so I put his face on a very famous picture of an astronaut in space. And I showed it to the team. And I was like, hey, look at these funny Valentines I made. And you immediately jumped in because of your knowledge, your vast knowledge of the Apollo program and that astronauts and all that. You said, "Oh, well, that's Bruce McCandless," and you said, "You know what? I think I know his son. I'm gonna email him." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And he ended up sending a nice signed copy of a book about his dad to my son Sawyer, and Sawyer was so excited about that. He still has his sticker, Dave, like tucked in behind like a little picture frame next to his bed. And if it was gone, he would be like, "Where's my sticker? Where's my sticker?" So, Bruce McCandless III, if you're listening, thank you so much for that. But let's talk a little bit more. How did you know him, and how does that tie into some of the hobbies that you do?
Oh, well, I don't do that much on Facebook and that, but I got into a group called Space Hipsters, and at the time I didn't know really who was all in it per se. But they're really it's a group of a lot of them are space historians and space artists, and some of them are the astronauts, and some of them are the astronauts' children and that, and all sorts of them. And so one time Bruce put up a kind of like I call it an APB on there on the post. Can someone help me explain something, right? And so I just happened to catch it, and then we started talking and that, and then one thing led to another, and there we were. So then we still talk quite a bit and that led to other things too. So it's always, you don't want to talk so much about it because it's really, it's their stories and that, and you want to help them out, or hopefully you can help them and that. But it's a lot of fun. The people, different kinds of people that I've been able to talk with and that, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes you pinch yourself.
Yeah, you almost can't believe it.
You almost can't believe it. Before that, I had, when Neil Armstrong had left a lot of his papers and that at Purdue, and Purdue's only 2.5 hours away. So I started going down there, looking at some research, and you're still, you're reading stuff that Neil had written or whatever, and here's the actual papers, and you're kind of pinching yourself. This is the real thing. But I've always been interested in space. That's another reason one reason I keep on wearing Hawaiian shirts. Not only are they comfortable and and I can spill food on it and no one knows, but one of my dad's younger brothers worked down at Cape Kennedy, and once in a very great while he would wear a Hawaiian shirt, and he wore one on the day of the first time he did that. He wore it on the day of the Apollo 1 fire. So I think of that in a way, but anyway, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. So you've been at KMC now 19 years, but that was really your introduction to the building automation space. Right. You hadn't done that before.
Nope.
Let's step through a little bit more. Kind of the progress that you made. You said that you started off in doing defense. You mentioned the F-15, then you mentioned the going out to California. What was it like? Let's talk a little bit about that, moving from the Midwest to California. I mean, culture shock, or was it like amazing? You loved it and you wish you never left?
Well, I mean, the California or Los Angeles in the 80s no longer exists, really, so you can't really go back from that. And it was one thing to do that when you're young and single, and I had a pickup truck, and it took an hour to get from home to work in that, and so I bought a Kawasaki, and it only took 22 minutes then, and so I drove 100,000 plus miles or whatever just in those few years, and that. But so, and it was different. People are a little more, I don't know. They're just a little different. The people they seem friendly at first, but then as you try to get to know them maybe a little bit more, then they're more little, but then, I have a lot of good friends still there, but it was different, but it was a way I kind of felt, I wanted to, it was about as far away as I could get from home. I wanted to be on my own and that, and do whatever and find out what's all out there and that. And then, I don't know, it was kind of also a culture shock for my wife when we got married too. And she's also from the Midwest, but I grew up not on a farm, but when I was little, we were on a farm and that, and shall I tell the story? Let's see. So when I grew up, my dad was a parochial school teacher, and the first house we had, it was a little four-room house. Didn't have a bathroom. Had an outhouse, and so we didn't have we had a shower, but it was outside. Didn't have a bathtub. And then he became a butcher. And so we graduated from a house that had one outhouse to a house that had two outhouses.
Oh.
And that was really something.
Yeah.
But so it was just different, even moving to St. Louis into the city for me. And but you adjusted. There was a lot of stuff a lot of different things you could do. And that's what I really liked about St. Louis and Los Angeles. So many different things you could do. Whereas here, what are you going to do? You go to Chicago or whatever, but it was different.
Yeah. And then that was also, you were out in California during the Olympics.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we were doing, I did a Rose Bowl parade too, where we would help build the floats and all that. And then we go out there and try to do a little bit of street evangelism and that. Before the Olympics, we were doing that too, where we'd have a set up a thing with a band and try to do some music there and do some evangelism that way. But yeah, it was 84 was Uberoth was the guy that was leading the whole Olympic committee kind of thing there in LA. So he had a big idea of, well, how do we make it profitable so we're not always in the red with the Olympics? And so you could become an official sponsor of the 1984 Olympics, right? And so I should have brought that picture to the show. But so we're working on nuclear missiles and that, and we were everybody's kind of making fun of, everybody's an official sponsor of the 84 Olympics. So I designed a T-shirt with our missile on the front and the mushroom cloud on the back, and we were the official missile of the 84 Olympics. And
this is for a sand volleyball team?
Yeah, so every Wednesday we go out on the beach and play sand volleyball. Well, not every Wednesday, but so we were out there playing, and then some reporters saw us, and, can I interview you guys? No.
Yeah, no.
Go away.
In fact, you could leave.
Yeah. Yes, you could leave. It's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but we had so much fun.
Yeah. So then you moved back to the Midwest. Was it the Midwest that you were doing you talked about consulting for Disney in one of their projects?
Yeah. So that was where we were. So we moved back to Fort Wayne first, where, like I said, that's where our seminary is. Mm-hmm. And then I was in Fort Wayne probably about 10 years, maybe not quite that long. Then we moved up here to South Bend area and worked for Crown. And then so after Crown and we worked for a couple other places, and then right before coming here, that's when I was doing Disney work. And it's, people, we used to have team building meetings at Disneyland, which is kind of fun.
Sure.
And we'd be out there at some bar and all that at Disneyland, and smoking cigars and drinking and all that stuff. And people would come up and, who are you guys? And well, we work for Disney. Oh, wow, and all that. But we weren't working on. They always ask what kind of rides are you working on.
Oh, sure.
We don't work on rides, but Disney has, I guess it has some glamour working for it before you. There's a different side of Disney, and I'm not going to go into that. But
what's interesting is there's graphs online that show you, the big box is Disney, and then there's all the smaller boxes within, and a third of it is Disney World, Disneyland, resorts, that sort of thing. But then the rest is all this proprietary, kind of sub-technology companies, and it's really, really fascinating how Disney is built. And so when you go and you invest in Disney, it's not just the resorts and the movies. Right. There's so much more behind it. So a lot of assets. But it is funny. I had a good opportunity one time to meet the manager of the Imagineers.
Oh,
I was at some hotel bar somewhere, and I struck up a conversation with some guy, and he asked me what I did, and I talked about smart buildings, and he was in to growing vegetables or something like that, indoor growing.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, oh, this is my wife. She works for Disney. It's, oh, cool. What do you do? It's like, oh, I lead the Imagineers too. It's like, oh, wow, that's cool. So it's like, even for me, it's like there's this glamour about, I remember growing up and, hearing about Imagineers.
Yeah. No, but they would take, when we first started, they would take us on I don't know what they call it. It's the secret tour of Disneyland and all that. And here's where, this or that is going on. That was always and there's it's almost like there's a whole city underneath it and under Disney World as well.
Yeah, you hear about the sub infrastructure, and then all the hidden doors and ways that people get in and out. That's fun. They've certainly built a neat and interesting environment there.
Yep.
So looking back at that time, still kind of sticking before KMC, before building automation, were there people are kind of stuck in your mind that either inspired you or taught you or kind of invited you into either opportunities or learnings? Who are some of those people that you could think of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the ones, when you first start out, the engineers and technicians at my first several companies, especially McDonnell Douglas or McDonnell Aircraft, these were some of the guys that had worked on Apollo and worked on Gemini and worked in the space program and or other. I was big in the aviation too, so that was fun. But just them, and then as years went by, a lot of the engineering managers, you kind of, to me, I learned more by example, I guess. I've learned a lot with reading too, but by example, and I could see how they would manage the engineers and try to make heads or tails of trying to prioritize what we need to do and try to help figure out, try to get to whenever you have problems, try to make sure you actually fix it and not hack it or whatever. And so they're an example of that patience and just getting people the resources that you need or try and that, and keeping that team environment going where everybody's in it and they're all passionate about it and can contribute then. And no one has, when you learn, no one has all the answers, Like when I came here, I didn't know anything about HVAC. I don't even know I could have spelled it, but it was, I was validation manager for the first couple of years, and then they put me in as a tech support manager, and I was doing both for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years or whatever. But that part was kind of easy for me because we have such a great tech support team. I didn't have to try to, I was learning a lot from them and that, but you want to keep that environment going where everybody can talk to each other and learn from each other. I mean, I could teach them things too about networking, let's say, and computer things, but the HVAC, that's all, that's cool. So everybody brings something to the table, and so there's a couple managers I think of as like, no, okay, don't be like that.
Yeah. Well, and you used that 4-letter word, team.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you and I have talked about that in the past, where it's, sometimes that word is thrown around. And there's a lot of words that are thrown around, because you're trying to inspire a team environment without actually creating a team environment.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And that's one of the things, again, just going back to how you and I operate. You have a perspective and I have a perspective, and they don't always align. But what we find out is like, it's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And you work together, and it has to be those things.
Yeah.
So it's like the utility absolutely has to be there, the design has to be there.
Yeah.
The demand is like, who's actually going to use this? Versus this would be really cool if we did.
Yeah, I was thinking being older, you've made a lot of mistakes, or I've made a lot of mistakes, and you see that, and you don't want to have to repeat those mistakes. But then at the same time, with the younger crowd, and that they've got, you've got ideas that you hadn't thought of or whatever, but you want to, so you need to talk about it and see how, all right, this is what we tried in the past. Did it work? Did it not work? And if it did not work, why? And then, so now we can build on that, build on that knowledge. And sometimes things don't work because the market's not quite ready. And sometimes it doesn't work for other reasons than that, but you have to understand, understand that history,
right?
But then keep going with new ideas too. So
yeah. I've tried to change the way that I bring ideas up. Instead of like, hey guys, I thought about this, or maybe those are still the words I use, but what I'm really saying is, this isn't. I recognize this probably isn't novel.
Oh.
and so, recognizing that first, like as a baseline, what do we think of this? And then, there's a lot of times, you'll say, it's like, oh yeah, we do that with this product over here. It's like, oh, neat. We should do it with this product over here. And, it's like, yeah, we should. It's like, oh, I'm really glad that at least I know I'm on the right track because someone else has already thought of it.
Yeah.
But then, it's like, okay, how can we take that and just tweak it a little bit to make it better? And, it's like, oh, well, those are also things that we've talked about a long time, and this is the opportunity that we get to do that. And so there's that interaction and the learnings. And
yeah, that was more, I guess, the big, talking about mentors, my dad was probably my biggest, and he he would do that when I was a kid. I thought I'd have invented something and all that, and I'd take it to him, and he'd try to draw out of me, why is this a neat thing or whatever? How are you going to build that? And then I'd be all still enthusiastic, and then he would say something like, well, if it really was that simple, don't you think someone else already would have done it by now? And so he was trying to keep me thinking about, all right, this is really new and all that. And then even if it's not, maybe you could still,
entire companies have been built on taking someone else's idea and doing it better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be novel. It just has to be the best.
That's made better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So leading up to this, almost 20 years ago, you get an opportunity at KMC. What, if you could remember, what was your impression of the industry as a whole? The technology being used, or the players in the market, like as you learned that.
Oh, boy. It was, well, at first, I didn't know what was what, and then it was, you could tell it was kind of, maybe, I don't know if I want to use the word older and all that, but it was, and they're even simpler. It's not quite that, it's different, because you have the embedded controllers and that, and they have inputs and outputs and that. Or for ours, what I was used to was making big things that had lots of inputs and outputs and running a lot faster. And one thing one thing that I guess impressed me was what the lack of standardization. And now back then, of course, changed that quite a bit, and that was good. But how long this equipment would last, they're it's out in the field for 20, 30 years. And so,
Yes.
Well, and so how do you make a really reliable thing to keep doing that? So it was a way of pushing technology a little differently than what I was used to in order to make it that reliable, and it's always got to work in that. Whereas, when you're building missiles, it only has to work for about 8 minutes.
Yeah.
After that, who cares?
Yeah.
But at the same time when I had the offer to come here, Disney had offered me to work out there. And we weren't really sure we wanted to, or we were pretty sure we did not want to work out in California. We were homeschooling and that, and the laws here are a lot better than out there and that. But then someone said, well, the Kahlers are pilots and they're Lutherans, and okay, well, and I already knew that, some of the guys already here and that, so that was good. But then, being here though, KMC, I was working for 8, 9 different companies before I came here altogether, and now it's been almost half my career, and it's still here. It's still exciting and fun, and it's really great to a group of people to work with, and everybody's really passionate, not just for what we're doing, but passionate for the customer and what they're doing, and we want the customer to succeed, not just because it's beneficial to us, but just for their sake.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people sense that. So
well, and you develop relationships over time, friendships, almost fatherly. I mean, you've performed at least one wedding for two
weddings. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've done 2 weddings for people that work here.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's special. I mean, what a wonderful, blessing and honor to be asked to do something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We got a big kick. Well, that was when we met. It was one of those weddings.
Yeah.
And that out there in Hookah Land or whatever.
Yeah. Spearmint Ambrosia. Yeah. Well, there's some good stories about that one. I want to have him on the podcast. Probably be the season opener teaser. This will also pressure him into doing it. Episode 1 of season 3. I'd like to have him, and I'd like to hear some of his stories too. One thing that you said that also impressed me was this longevity of the technology that's out in the space. I remember when I first took a tour here, and they took me up to the validation lab, and many of our customers have been there. I think it's the walls lined with pretty much everything we've ever made. And there's all these lights and things still blinking on them. I'm like, why in the world are these still plugged in? It's like, oh, because these are still out in the field, like working. It's like, when did we make this? It's like, well, this was 85, this was 86, it's like, are you kidding me? It's like, no, sure enough. And then, you hear about like our proprietary line that came out in the 80s also, and how much of that is still going out into the field, and, things being fixed and repaired, and how do we transition those out? I mean, it's like these things are built to last and to be put in and to stay. And it's like, oh, that's a different business model, especially coming from RVs, which was like a 2-year warranty, and then you're going to want to probably replace it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was somewhat of a change too for me, because now you're talking, I was more into like the IT kind of world, and now we have OT, and there's a little different, mindset there, and a different market or a different business, set too, and so I had to get used to, people not knowing, how to set up a network and all that. But now you have to be able to explain it and show them if that way they can do it themselves, of course, and that. And some people, I mean, it's just a different thing to think about.
Right.
And then even there's other aspects of IT versus OT that it's different. It's not even the technology. It's like, how do you market things, or how do you do this or that? And it's different, and now I used to say it's good for people, to have some bucket time, right?
Yeah.
But now I've been thinking that it's not just bucket time. You got to have OT bucket time.
Right.
And that's different than IT bucket time. And it's good we have both, here, but most of our customers are, of course, still OT in that. But and again, they appreciate that we, with our people, we've been in the industry in that, or at least our tech guys in that, and we feel their pain.
Right.
We know it.
Well, and we're trying to train them up, and we're trying to give them a pathway to learn both the OT and the IT at the same time. And, I think technicians are going to have more and more asked of them coming up. And we've talked about that quite a bit on the podcast as well. We don't have to talk about the particular topic, but I want to talk about the idea of how we discussed it. So there was a new technology recently that we were talking about potentially implementing. And you wrote a pretty long email that was talking about philosophical, ethical, and moral concerns around this technology.
Right.
And my very first impression reading it was, I am so glad that we are having these conversations, because I think they're so important to have. And I think the topic in particular, not to be too vague about it, but I think it'll be a topic of the podcast in the future.
Yeah.
And I want to have that kind of conversation around it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's, anything can be polarizing. But the whole idea that you took the time, you wrote the email, you sent it to a subgroup of us because you wanted to have that conversation. It was important to you.
Yeah.
Why was it so important to you?
Oh, well, you want to, being an engineer, I guess, you want to, for me at least, you want to build things that's useful for people, and in a way that's how you're being a servant to them. And, but you don't want to, some things, people would ask me, well, you used to build nuclear missiles and all that, and how do you justify that? Well, you do because of different things and all that. So there's a moral aspect to what you're doing, and you don't want to, I guess, enable the worst, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. And, as a Christian, you still want to serve, but you still want to keep that moral aspect of it as well. And when I wrote that, I'm still asking the questions too. Is this really what we want to do, and maybe there's a better thing we could be doing, or maybe there's a better way of doing this. And this is the second time we've had that conversation. Another one was more, you were kind of pushing on the moral stuff, and then I was saying, well, it's not a big of a deal, but it's like, well, maybe it really is.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there's a fear to bring those sorts of conversations up a lot of time, because, you have groupthink mentality. And if everyone's like, oh, this seems like a good idea, and we can make money doing this, and that's probably the most important thing. Right. It's like, well, what about these other considerations? I didn't really think of that. Yeah. It's like, well, why don't we at least have that conversation? Yeah. And, that's one of the things that we've done, even around the concept of leadership here at KMC, is how can we think about leadership differently, not in the sense of like, yeah, we should all be good leaders. But it's like, what does that even mean? And typically it's an uncomfortable conversation because you got to dig down. But, same thing. It's like, are we really sitting back and thinking about the technology we're using? And I think there's a lot of conversations that have yet to be had around AI and generative AI and Chat GPT and all these other things that people are trying to, just overwhelmingly accept as like, this is the new norm and everyone should use it. And if you're not using it, you're behind. It's like, well,
yeah, I call that, you're kind of doing a fad thing. And you want to be careful, like, I guess one of the kind of recent ones right now, chat's kind of, or AI is kind of, it's been out there for a while, but now finally the technology is there and all that. But, big data was kind of one of those things. It was a nice word and that, and now all of a sudden we got to do big data. And it's like, why? What are you going to really do with it? And how is it going to serve and make things better, really? You can have all the data you want, but then you got to, so then we shifted and went to use like smart data or actionable data, and that makes more sense. But yeah, you got to, it's not just simply building the next new thing. You want to, how is it really going to help and that? And again, how's it going to last for 30 years or whatever?
Yeah. So this will be episode 9 of the podcast. Episode 8 of this season is with Emmanuel Daniel. And so if you haven't heard that one yet, go back and listen to that one. One of the things he does that I think is unique in the industry, at least in terms of just a relentless focus on it, is the human experience inside of a building. Not tenant experience or occupant experience, but human experience. And he took it down to the level of, what can we do at Microsoft campuses that would allow you to have 5 extra minutes with your children in the morning.
That's
I know.
Yeah, that's
I know.
Cool.
And but it's just like that relentlessness around it. And so if we have that same relentlessness in how we bring technology and solutions to the market, and I don't just mean KMC, but I mean all of us as an industry, that's just relentlessly focused on, what's the human experience and how are we serving? You've used the term servant several times, and I so identify with that, I guess, because that's what I like. I also want to be a servant, to the people around me and our customers, and I want to do what's right by them. And sometimes we can have a myopic view, and we kind of need to be pulled back just a little bit. That doesn't mean we don't do it, but let's make sure that we're looking at it from all angles and having the conversation. Yeah. So again, I don't think that's something that you would bring up yourself, but I wanted to ask you about it because, I've seen you do that several times over the last 7 years that I've worked here.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
If you can believe it's been 7 years. Yeah.
Time flies when you have fun.
It sure does. Let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that you give back in how you teach others. And you do it in a couple of interesting ways. And there's 2 in particular that I wanted to bring up. One was your ballooning, which is also kind of a hobby, but you invite others in to learn about it. Yeah. And then just your college teaching. So let's start with ballooning. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, since another one of my hobbies have been astronomy and that, and Adler Planetarium is just not too far away in that. And so there was one day I found out they have this high altitude ballooning program for students and that. And so the students put experiments, and then the guys at Adler will put the balloon up and all that, and they get nice space pictures, and the Earth is round and the sky is black and so forth. And it's a big thrill, I think, for the kids. Well, I was supposed to go out there to help them on and learn it, but then the car broke down and I couldn't. And I finally realized, wait a minute, I don't have to go there. I can do it myself. Yeah. And so we did, over the years, we did 20 different flights, and it's always just a kick. You watch especially elementary kids, but even the high school kids and that, and the college ones too. I mean, but the elementary ones, when you're getting ready to launch, they do the count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and when you let go, they run after the balloon just to chase it and that. And then when we find it and we get something back, they'll have their own experiment and that, and now they've got something it's been 20 miles up, and that's that's pretty high in that. And then even in the real world, when you trying to do things on the International Space Station and all that, a lot of proof of concepts are done with balloons. So I've worked with some people with that too, and it's fun. I haven't done one when COVID hit. It's kind of hard to me to go to somebody's house and knock on the door and say, "Hey, my balloon is in your backyard."
Yeah.
And they're, who are you? And it's COVID. What are you doing here? So I haven't done it since COVID yet. But.
Right. Well, and so there's one in particular that you're still looking for.
Yes.
So just in terms of, everyone listening, I think we have a couple million viewers, particularly in the local region but it was during the last lunar eclipse, right?
Solar eclipse.
Solar eclipse. Yeah.
Yep. So they was
caused by the moon.
Right, caused by the moon. So August. So if you're close to Carbondale or Centralia, I guess it'd be Centralia, Illinois, and that we had launched the balloon from Perry County, Missouri, to follow the totality in that. And it was. If you haven't been to a total eclipse, it's just crazy.
There's one coming up next year in Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we beat it.
Yeah.
But that's the only one where the radios, I had 3 radios and this and that, and they all failed. So I know about where it's at, but I can't, it's hard to get down there and search through the woods. I know it's in one of 2 woods area, but if you're living in that area, send me an email and I can show you the map and go out. And I've got tree climbing equipment so we can get it down.
Yeah,
but
to send someone else up.
But but of all the ones that we did, it was like, this is like the epitome of what you're, and that's the one that.
Yeah, of course.
But still, I mean,
that's part of the fun though too. Is like, will we find it?
Yeah, well, yeah.
When we find it, will it still work?
And
what do we see?
It's not just you go out there and you visit older folks because it's on their property. I got fed blueberry pie. That's the best I've ever. You meet all sorts of neat people, and it's interesting that even in this day and age, people are still real helpful.
Yeah,
in that. So
and it's funny you say that. Now we're just talking about Midwestern sensibilities, perhaps, but we did it was 2020, and we did a lemonade stand. And I could not believe the number of people that pulled over to buy lemonade for my 2 little boys. And they were like, it's just this is what we needed. And it's like, then they stayed and they talked. And a cop stopped by, and we got a picture with a cop, and it was like the coolest thing ever. But yeah, no, there's something special about those sorts of opportunities that almost seem fortuitous, that you get to meet some of these people.
Yeah, we've had encounters with Amish twice. There were some Amish boys that climbed a tree to get one of our balloons. There was another one around here. He knew the farmer that we had to talk with, and he knew his phone number. And I said, all right. So I dialed it on the phone, and I handed him the phone to talk to him. He didn't know how to even use the phone. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. This is it. Anyway, that's fun.
So, that's one way. I mean, you use your hobby to try to inspire kids, which I think is really amazing. Maybe there's another nuclear physicist that's going to work on the next bomb or the next next secret plane.
Yeah, right.
Who knows? Yeah, in Roswell or wherever. But tell us a little bit about some of the college teaching that you do, Professor Bohlmann.
Yeah, we've been doing that. I guess this is my 13th year. Just started out with our new next door neighbor had just mentioned that one of their professors had just passed away and they were looking for somebody. It's like, well, I'll just go down there. So I went down there and I got hired on the spot. And that was so I teach, since I'm an adjunct, I kind of teach the leftovers as to what the other professors are, they only have so many professors. And so I teach a lot of like 100 level courses, sometimes 200, but that's in IT, it could be cybersecurity. A lot of times now lately it's been electronics and I just finished teaching an HVAC class. And so it's kind of a hodgepodge. And one of my, but and you get a whole different breadth, I guess, of students. It's rare that we get students that are fresh out of high school. So there's a lot of second career people and older people in that, but they all are. You're always learning from them too, and how they see things and that. But I think we have fun because I try to bring in, here's a real world. If you're trying to do this is a real world kind of situations, and the book is wrong here. Well, maybe they focus on that instead of this and that. But we have a blast. We have a blast.
Some of my favorite professors, they're like, yeah, the book's wrong. Yeah. I want you to read chapters 2 through 8, but skip 6 and 7.
Right.
It's like, oh, why? It's like, because none of that matters.
Well, yeah, I try to make it. I mean, and like last night when I was teaching, they enjoy catching my mistakes because I'll be on the whiteboard doing something, and I try to encourage them, follow along, and I'm not put out if I make a mistake and you point it out, because then they're learning it and that, and then we laugh about it and say, I forgot how to add 1-on-1 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that back and forth, I think, really helps too. So
yeah. Well, and it was just in a different call yesterday that resistors was brought up.
Oh yeah.
And you said, oh well, this is what we're talking about in the midterm.
That's right.
Do you want to take the midterm tonight? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, oh man. So you have a very diverse background. You've done lots of things, but like you said, kind of this whole second half. Yeah, I know, the ancient. But it's like the whole second half of your career has really been with KMC. And so, would you say that HVAC better than like anything else that you'd done before that?
No, it's like I kind of alluded to. It's a kind of different mindset in a way. So like at school, I teach analytics and I teach digital, and people catch on to the analytics with the resistors and all that. But then you try to teach them how to program, it's like a foreign language, or vice versa, or you try to teach them how to do chips and that. So HVAC is still not like a intuitive part for me. Networking and computers and all that, that's still really intuitive in that. But for, the rest of the guys, like in tech support, HVAC's very intuitive for them. And I think it's more than just simply having that experience, although that comes a lot with it. But I've got quite a bit of bucket time, but it's a different kind of bucket. Really, I've never had to tell somebody what was wrong with their air handler. I wouldn't.
Right.
But I could tell them why it's not communicating, and that's kind of what I brought. But so I mean, I know the terms and that, but it usually, don't tell anybody. But usually after not too long into a conversation, if it's an HVAC conversation, it's like, okay, I can kind of follow up.
Yeah. It's like, I understood what you meant up until right after, hey, Dave.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, I had an interesting conversation like that too. It was last week, and someone asked about, what's a typical ROI on a rooftop unit? I was like, well, I'm really not sure. It's like, oh, well, it's a 70-ton.
Here, well, well, see, I mean, now I know what that means, but I still don't have experience on.
I know all the words you just said. Yeah.
But I don't know what the ROI is on it.
Yeah.
I know what I can picture it.
But where the local hookah lounge is, you and I, we're right there. We got that. Oh, so if you had to give some advice to technicians in the field, we do quite a bit of support, and like you said, you do a lot of the support on the larger sites, and those larger sites using our newer kind of technology, not as legacy as a 20-year-old product or something like that. What are some of the things that you would just really encourage them to dig into a little bit more, and like if you're going to invest your time in something, learning over the next couple years, what do you think those things should be?
Well, if they are, try that, you want to try to learn IT kind of stuff because it's coming and it's going to be more pervasive and all that. But that doesn't mean you have to go and get a Cisco certified or things like that. So, but there's enough stuff I think on YouTube that might help, and or you can, I don't know, trying to think of playing around at the house, or when you set up your own home network, let's say, well, you're doing IT stuff,
right?
So dig in a little bit more as to why are these things working together, and some of just the basics on what's a gateway and what's a router and what's an IP address and all that, and Wi-Fi, and people understand that. And I think people they really know more about it than what they think they know.
Right.
They just really haven't had a chance to articulate it, I guess.
Or they don't know that what they know carries over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of what, maybe roundabout way, I tell my students that, 95% of rocket engineering really isn't rocket engineering. It's just engineering. And that now there's the 5% that's left. It's hard, but what you're learning here, you can use it anywhere in that. And that's just, same for what you were doing to build your home network or whatever, or you can do that and apply that to what you're doing.
There's skill sets you learn that can be applied to nearly anything. If you're good at marketing, you can probably market anything. If you're good at sales, you could probably sell anything. Then it's just a matter of knowledge behind it, knowing how to apply the skill set in the context.
I guess one, sometimes I'll do a philosophy of engineering lecture with my students, and it's really how do you troubleshoot. And you want to be, you don't want to do what I call the popcorn or a shotgun approach and just change all sorts of things, and then all of a sudden, now it works, but now you don't know, why it works or anything. But you want to be methodical, and you want to even go back to the basics. That's what I try to do. If something's wrong, don't presume that anything that you actually did got done or whatever. Go back to the beginning, kind of work your way through it, and be methodical in that. But and just keep learning. And besides networking, some of it is we have different kinds of sensors coming out, and that's going to be more important as people keep fighting with the air quality and learning that kind of technology. But then still, for the most of our customers, it's really just, give me something that'll give me the CO2 level or that, and it's just another point in a way. But but then also, again, something that you're already applying is more and more things are going to get cloud-based, and IoT and it's something they're already doing. We're applying it to HVAC. So.
It's a matter of kind of having your foot on both sides, right? Know the legacy stuff, but don't be afraid of that new stuff either. But again, understand the context of what's happening with your IT knowledge, cybersecurity, and that sort of thing. Your comment about going back to the basics kind of made me chuckle because I wish I could remember the exact circumstance, but it was something as simple as we can't figure out what this is working or what this is working. This isn't communicating anymore. It's like, well, did they unplug something? Yep. Right. We found it. Let's just, and I don't know how many times putting together a demo or, setting something up, standing up a new Commander instance for, airflow measurement. I get there's like, why is this not work? Because it's not plugged into the internet. There we go. All right.
Yeah. And that was one thing that surprised me when I first was first working here was how often cables break. And it's like, and then it's, and because we didn't in previous lives, I didn't have to worry about the cable for some reason. And OT, people are yanking on them all the time or this and that, and so they'll,
Well, so bifurcation, it's one of those great words. We did that video for bifurcating an MSTP network, and several times in that video we say, what could be the cause of this? A crushed cable, a stretched cable, a cable that's pulled out, and that's probably one of the things that's wrong. And if it's not that, then it's the controller. It's like, so check those things first. And again, it just kind of goes back to the basics so many times.
Yeah.
And why IT jokes will have you turned it off and back on again.
Yeah, I remember the first time I was used the word bifurcate was our very first flat stat job. And sometimes when you go out to do a job, now that you're there, they want you to go to other jobs too. So we went to another school out there, and the guy just asked me, what's the trick of figuring out what's wrong with the MSTP? And I said, there is no trick. You just have to bifurcate. And we didn't, I don't remember where I came up with that word then, but it was a neat, I think it's a neat word, easy to say, not that many syllables and all that, and then you can explain it's just really divide and conquer and divide it, you do it split in half and all that. But it's a funny word and it sticks in their minds.
Sure does.
But you still gotta do the work.
Yeah.
And then Gene made it famous.
He sure did. Man, that was a great video too.
Cool.
Yeah, we had to update it and we lost like 12,000 views on it too. So, but that's okay. Well, Dave, I just want to end this podcast with saying I so appreciate working with you. I look forward to working with you for many, many years to come, and just to continue to learn and continue to have these intentional conversations, to be continually kept honest, which I appreciate. And then to learn from all your mistakes. Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But many Guinnesses and hookah trips in our future for sure.
Yeah, a few cigars. Hopefully, you get older, you were a little worried about, am I being a little too hard or crabby or whatever? And then you realize, grouchy. Oh no, then this is why. Anyway, but it's
a grouchy old man.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't really, anyway.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate you too very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I don't know. Amazing. All right, guys. Well, that wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast, a production of KMC Controls. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe and share. And if there's anyone that you would like to see on this podcast, tag them in the comments or reach out to us. We'll tag them in the comments. And as always, we appreciate you listening. Until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.